You're on, Pete.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody who is on the webinar, and welcome to the ACT-IAC Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest webinar here on March 17th. We are super excited for those of you who are joining us via the Join Me application interface as well as over the phone. My name is Pete Saronis. I am super honored and excited to facilitate the next hour and a half with our guests, Melody Bell and Mark Krishko. I want to give a big shout out right now, just at the outset, to my colleagues Tom Cuneo, Deirdre Murray, Nancy Delanoche, and the ACT-IAC community for bringing this fireside chat to those of you tuning in. And we will be recording this for those who want to capture some of the insights at a later date. We have an audio bridge, which again, if you are online and want to share, it's 202-602-1295 with an access code of 288-148-759. We can have questions submitted through the chat box to Ms. Nancy Delanoche throughout the webinar, and what we're going to do is treat this as a very virtual coffee talk, if you will, given the world we're living in at the moment where virtual communications are the new normal. So we're excited and we appreciate those of you, again, who have dialed in. I'm going to moderate, and next slide, please. We're going to talk, and I'm going to do a brief intro to my friends and colleagues. Friends first, Miss Melody Bell, who you could see there if you haven't pulled up on screen or know who she is. She's an amazing individual who currently is at the United States Department of Energy's Office of Environmental Management as the Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for Resource Management. We'll get into that, but you're going to love hearing her journey and what she's doing today. Mark Krishko, the Principal Deputy Director for Acquisition Policy and Analytics. I like that combination, Mark, and for enterprise data, again, at the Department of Defense. And for those of you wondering who this crazy guy moderating is, I served in the federal government for 25 years, former CTO at the Department of Energy and Education, and I'm living the dream, connecting back with colleagues like Melody and Mark, and I appreciate the opportunity. Before we get into the topic, which, you know, we kind of wanted to figure out what can we do when you have folks from two cabinet level agencies who are leaders and change agents in the mission space. And that's a word we're going to use throughout the talk today. Mission, not so much around IT, but how IT enables the mission, whether it's through acquisition, whether it's through programmatic type of work. And I know that you will glean from Melody and Mark so many anecdotes, so many stories that they will share. And I think if you follow them on LinkedIn or you read about or hear them when they speak, their stories are amazing. And I'm going to do a little bit of a not reading bio, but share with you the context of, I think, their body of work. And again, not just their professional formation, but their journey through, back when they were being educated in places like Harvard and the University of Maryland. So Melody, I'm going to brag about you a little bit, and then you can add on, and Mark as well. But for those of you listening in, Melody Bell, Associate Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Environmental Management Entity within the Department of Energy, a $35 billion thereabouts agency where there's an incredible mission that ranges from intel to environmental management to national nuclear security, et cetera. She's been a senior advisor to the Associate Deputy Secretary, a director for program execution in the Office of Energy Efficiency. She's been a Deputy Assistant Secretary in Business Administration. She participated in the Department of Homeland Security's SES Candidate Development Program and worked at the Nevada Site Office and the Rocky Flats mission entity. She is unbelievable and amazing. And, her education spans Harvard, the Colorado School of Mines, Pepperdine University, where she maintains an MBA, 2 Bachelors of Science degrees from the U.S. Air Force Academy, and a Master of Science in Environmental Science and Engineering. Yes, you heard me mention the U.S. Air Force Academy. She is a veteran, and thank you, Melody, for your service. You're amazing. I'm a big fan, as you know. Oh, and by the way, she just happens to spend a bit of her time helping kickstart the Senior Executive Advisory Board chapter for the United States Department of Energy. So, Mel, I'll come back to you in a minute. Let me brag a little bit about Mark Christo.
Thanks so much for that very generous introduction. I'm kind of, flat.
Well, Mel, the good news is for you and Mark is this is to get all that out so that you can kind of fill in the gaps of that wonderful story you have and how it's helping the department advance its mission. So I'm excited to kind of kick it back to you here in a minute. Mark, 10 years, 3 months, Principal Deputy Director for Policy and Analytics and Enterprise Data at the DoD. Mark is someone that I can sit with and listen to about his perspective on data governance, data access, data science, whatever the topic is, and then remind myself that he's in acquisition. He's been in procurement. He knows cradle to grave that life cycle and how data is driving a lot of the mission, not only at DoD, but also impressing upon other parts of the federal government and industry. A Deputy Director for Acquisition Resources and Analysis, a Director in the Office of Strategy, Data, and Design, an Assistant Deputy Secretary for Strategic Sourcing, and spent about 8 years at NAVAIR, the Naval Air Systems Command. This guy has got a body of knowledge and stories that, again, I can sit to and listen and take copious notes. So without further ado, and again, being a Maryland Terp that he is, and so forth, and really because he's a Pittsburgher, I got a lot of love for Mark. Those of you know me, I'm a big fan of the Steel City. I'm going to turn it, and the three of us now are going to talk a bit about how these bodies of work, these pedigrees that they maintain are influencing their role in their respective agencies. So Melody, if you could take about 5 minutes or so and talk a little bit about that journey, what you're doing today and sort of what you are addressing from not just supporting the mission at DOE, but even the impact of what's happening in the world as we know it, your perspective on the next, several months and what you're going to be focused on. And then Mark, the same with you. So go ahead, Mel, you have the mic.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thank you for this wonderful platform. As for the audience, I enjoy working with Pete so much. He brings such energy, such passion. He is just a wealth of ideas, innovation, creativity. Some of the things I'll talk a little bit about in my journey. So he just embodies, I think, a lot of the key attributes that we need to capture moving forward. So thank you so much, Pete, for inviting me to be a part of this. I thought of a couple of things when you were talking about the mission and the needs. And we have a saying in our organization, mission first, people always, because I discovered through my journey, starting with the Air Force Academy, the military, being involved in the global positioning satellite systems and other major system acquisitions, is that you don't get anything accomplished without that energy and passion of the people, enabling kind of the best out of everybody. So my bio, you heard about, but I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing now and why this people always is so critical. I manage resources, budget, planning, workforce, facilities, information management systems, cyber activities. And we're in a very challenging world now, moving from industrial age, obviously, to information cloud, evidence of the virtual aspect of what we're doing today. And I see my journey as helping to transform and change the paradigm and mindset, to move to that future of where we need to go to bring out creative thinking, to bring out strong analytical and data analytics capability to bring out some of that innovation and creativity. A story I will tell, and a lot of it has to do with my mentoring. I'm a seasoned worker and definitely have more years behind me than I have, work years behind me than I have in front of me, which is good. But I look behind and I'm challenged with, how are we building and developing that next generation to come behind us, particularly with those items I mentioned on we want innovation, we want creativity, we want people to use the data analytics tools that are available to them, and how do we poise them to be leaders? Some of the things that I've been working on involves empowerment and engagement. Creating peer coaching has been a phenomenal resource that we utilize to each one teach one, so to speak, and where we put up systems and tools using SharePoint and other database systems to house our knowledge. So as part of our coaching program, we've asked each of our subject matter experts to put their information in the database to use the virtual tools, and then we set up regular brown bags lunch and learns where we're just kind of pulling everybody together and talk about a challenge. How did you solve that challenge in the environmental management world of the liquid high-level liquid waste tanks? How did you solve that challenge in the environmental management world of ensuring that our plume was not migrating beyond the border? So just really utilizing data management tools for knowledge sharing, empowerment, and really just engage folks.
Melody, Melody, listen, I'm writing my own copious notes down. Number one, I know a little bit about this, knowing you so well, but every time you talk, it kind of gets my mind thinking. And I think for our audience out there, some of the words that resonated with me, and I think should with you, whether you're an industry or a federal entity or you're a student or what have you, is the concept of outreach and communications. Melody, you definitely, I know, care about that, whether it's helping industry understand your mission better, engaging, bringing communities together in your own agency, a dot connector that you are. I applaud that, and I say that I hope folks who hear this understand that your people matter, mission first, people always, is something that is unique and rare, and, shout out to you. We'll come back to that in a minute because I want to explore some of the next gen and some of how you view technology enabling your mission and some maybe use cases or two. Let me kick it over to my friend Mark, who has used a phrase with me recently, and that's how data enables him, analytics enable him to make better decisions. And it's not just about from an acquisition perspective, but, in the ecosystem of buying and selling. So Mark, talk a little bit, brag a little bit about yourself, but hopefully I teed you up well enough and tell us a few things that we would know about you and what you're passionate about.
Well, one, I don't like talking about myself, and I kind of hate even hearing about myself sometimes. But let's talk a little bit about data now. First, thank you, Pete, and thank ACT-IAC for putting this on so we can share some of this information. And it is about community, and it's one of the things where I always like to participate and help others learn from us, and we can learn from them about where we're going and what we're trying to do. My passion is data, and I think it has always maybe been in the background of that because in this strange time that we live right now, data and information is critically important for a lot of things. And so is mission. We're trying to solve a problem here and move forward with our data and mission area of solving for the Department of Defense. Now, I focus in terms of the acquisition community. My role is a small role in the department. We are a big department, and what we focus on is the data and the enablement of data for the undersecretary and for the services and program managers, that we can help guide them, not oversee them, guide them in finding the solutions that they need to find in terms of either leading the department, executing programs, or solving the nation's problems. And our moral compass is always pretty clear. It's the soldiers, sailors, and airmen. We are supporting people that are in theater, that are fighting the battles, whether they be in cyber, whether they be physical battles. of helping them and making sure that they have the right equipment, the right tools, the right information at the right time to execute their missions. And it is a fascinating topic in terms of data. The community, both industry as well as the federal government, as well as all of our cabinet level agencies have evolved over the past 10 years. And a new lexicon and dialogue has opened up of how do we take data to solve problems of our mission areas. And to me, that is a fascinating passion and a journey where we're going to have to help the organizations transform, much like industry has been doing, to take advantage of these assets that we have that we call data, to make better decisions, to find better tactics, and to do things appropriately.
So, Mark, let me riff off that for a minute, because one of the thoughts I'm thinking, and for Melody as well, is the transformation, leveraging data, the journey, with all that's happening in government now around whether it's through the Management and Government Technology Act to the Modernizing of Government, and data is the new oil, and yada. There's the distilling of it. But sometimes I think, and we've talked about this in some of our workshops where we've just been conversing around, the power of data. Sometimes it's finding it and curating it, aggregating, and then making sense of it. So think about some of those use cases that we could share, the 4 examples, and maybe to pivot back to Melody for a New York minute. Melody, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that with what's going on now with this pandemic and the coronavirus and what everybody seems to be using in text messaging and emails about the new normal. I think we are in a new normal, and video communications, webinars like this are going to become significantly important, forcing folks to rethink about how we collaborate. From a virtual communications perspective, if you can just ideate for a minute, how do you see the world changing in this new normal, and sort of your role and what you do in pressing the flesh and being in rooms with people where, it matters to have that face time? Can you talk a little bit about how virtual communications will play a part in your mission?
Yeah, excellent question. And during this pandemic, we're not pressing the flesh, obviously. We've been told to keep our, social distance.
Yeah, bad phrase of mine. Sorry about that.
But just even that statement shows how our mindset is so much into the connecting, pressing the flesh, whereas the future of work, the future of the workplace, the future of our workers is more into this virtual world where we need the tools. For example, several of our folks, myself included, have been told to exercise, maximum telework. We're finding our systems, we don't even have the bandwidth necessarily for everybody to be online at the same time. That's a physical challenge. The other challenge we're finding is that we rely too much on emailing back and forth, where we're not using our cloud and SharePoint tools to have our files where we can collectively as a community work on various documents and have the same information at the same time. It's like, well, what version email did you send that information? Is that the latest information? Even our meeting invites, we're finding people will send an email. I'm going to send you a meeting invite. Next thing you know, you got the meeting invite. There's no information associated with that meeting invite. So it's changing the way we obviously communicate with each other. It's also changing the way we think about how to have the data and information available to us so that we as a community can share it without pressing the flesh or physically being there. It's really a game changer, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah, Melody, a lot of questions have come in, in my world now, being an industry, it's so much as you've just, cemented that you up in the morning, you go to work, you take the commute. We take a lot of that now. We think about it as, one, we can't, and two, that's a lot of commute time and opportunity to leverage a lot of the virtual communications to arguably, be more connected and more present with our individuals, whether it's through active listening and not have millions of meetings. And if I'm an industry person listening, what an opportunity to figure out how you can connect with some of your colleagues in government, more directly one-on-one, because this is the new normal. This is the landscape that hopefully is going to allow us in some way, shape, or form to rethink the collaboration with individuals, with human beings, which is less about the meetings and more about the content and the context of when we can communicate. So thank you for that. For a quick second, let me pivot back to Mark. Mark, a lot of this virtual communication discussion, there's been discussion around, virtual comms, and Melody hit on some of this, that it's not just having a telework agreement, it's also having the capability, the right equipment, and I think we're going to realize in short order that we are not as mature as a government, maybe as an industry, in having a lot of that capabilities, because you may have the best stuff at home on the right computer, but if the person you're trying to talk to doesn't, it could prove ineffective. Can you talk a little bit about your experience or what you're envisioning and how it's going to impact the acquisition world to some extent, and maybe some of the cyber physical concerns that exist around data protection and the like? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts on that. You covered an awful lot of topics there, right, on that. Just in that
pick
one
and choose
question.
What you want, man. Pick and choose what you want. You know me.
Well, and you also set me up for something else. You wanted to talk about data curation, and that is another whole topic. Let me go to data curation first. It's necessary for everyone to have a data curator. And I'm going to say that in that term and not necessarily in the CDO terms of what we're used to having. We need those too. But we need experts in our fields to understand the data and the data management principles about this, because this will segue over to those other topics you have. We need to become experts in our data. I mean, we are fresh off the journey of outsourcing our intellect, rightly or wrongly, and having it locked up in code and systems where we forgot what we knew. And systems took over. We, as both commercially and as well as in the government, need to claw back our intellect and realize that systems, technology, and data are our processes. They're not just a policy document. They're just not an instruction that is issued. All of those things are now instrumented in technology, and we need to understand those parts. Because we can't take that other leap, and I'll get back to connectivity because I think that's going to be a huge challenge. But understanding what data we're curating and understanding not only what it means and how it can be used, but what security do we need to have, and what access and dissemination do we need to have? Because we talk about this in just a lot of hyperbole words. We talk about data sharing, and everyone has their own connotation of what that really means. If we are truly going to enable our institutions with data sharing, we have to tackle some very difficult issues. And it's a bit of vignette. And anyone who wants to Google search and find a few RAND reports that we had supported in terms of they're all publicly available, access and dissemination of acquisition data, talking about why it's hard in sharing those information. We made sure we went back to some of the policies and understood why we were doing what we were doing and what behaviors we're doing it. So often, and no offense to the good CIOs and the CIO in the infrastructure and application worlds, their answers, their direction was, well, no, you can't go do that. And in fact, we had an incident yesterday where they saw anomalies on our systems that where we're sharing data across this, that were just shut down. And sure, we shut down for security reasons, but we also took our business processes out of the institution. We had to go work with them to figure out how to get them back up. And it is not just the providence of the technologist, it's the providence of the business as well, too. And I think I've seen this emerge over the past few years where people in roles like mine, people in roles like Melody, are now in the forefront of not just exercising process, but exercising stewardship over data, too. And And I think we have a ways to go, but we'll get there, but we just need to keep talking about that too.
So you used words like experts in your data, yes, curating. We talked about aggregating, and you said that data curation, or being a data curator, is equally, or maybe I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but we've talked about this. Having a chief data officer for the United States Department of Defense, or one in each agency. And Melody, let me go back to you for a New York minute or second. The federal government, the emphasis on data, whether it's an acquisition or environmental management or in a CIO shop for asset management, who knows, identity and access management. What are your thoughts on that, having a person, and what is that role in your mind really, or what should it be to galvanize the community to bring all these data stewards and owners together? I mean, I just think of how big the data sets are at the DOE and the DoD alone. How do you have one person kind of, lead that effort?
Thanks for the question, Pete. And Mark, you said something that resonated with me about some of the challenge when you're working with the classic policies of your CIOs and the framework and mindset that they're coming from. Being on the program side, I'm obviously looking at what are the tools for my success and my mission. So coming from a program standpoint, sometimes challenges and adds a little tension with the classic, CIO. They're just looking at the systems and the tools. But it's so important and critical, it's people that define the business process, the people that are using the system. So the message I would give to industry is not necessarily seek out and go to your CIOs for your data tools or for your systems, because they're just looking at it from a system perspective, not how it's going to enable the mission. I'm representing the program, and I would tell industry, you have to reach out to the programs, understand the problems they're trying to solve, understand their mission, understand their challenges. Ask them what keeps them up at night and what are their current processes or policy that they're working with and enabling. And a lot of times it's not lead with what's the greatest slick system I can sell you. How can I help you solve your challenge and problem is what you need to lead with.
Well, Melody, let me go back to Mark now. Ping pong, you hit on a few topics there, which, the importance of data. Mark, you cemented that. Obviously, Melody, thank you for those comments about programs, problems, current process. In order to, if I'm an industry and I'm selling technology, I would say I 100% agree, having grown up in the CIO shop myself, we're there to keep lights on and do our best to understand that mission. I think I'm hearing you say that industry should find out who are the mission owners, folks that might not have the titles, even though both of you have amazing titles. But Mark, what is your thought on what Melody just suggested when it comes to finding the people who actually, require the applications and capabilities of the cloud vendor, the RPA tool, what have you? How do you find an effective way for industry to engage with you when it's a technology matter, being a mission owner?
Oh, well, there's a lot of questions in that one too, Pete.
You're good at assimilation, my friend. That's why I throw them all at you that way.
Well, I think there's two parts to that. One, let me touch upon the relationship between CIO and missionary. We've got to meet in the middle. It's just that simple. We've got to work to seek and understand each other and build our bridges across. We are one organization. We are not silos of excellence. And if one silo is excellent and the other one's falling, we're all going to fail. And I think so often that, and I've always been a little bit critical sometimes of the missionary, where we've been a little bit slow to the party. And that we didn't invest in what we needed to and understand that service providers, and it comes in many forms, are part of our solution and are a part of us. And I think that's, in my sense of where I am organizationally, we have to build those bridges. And I do not see, it's kind of like a peanut butter cup. I don't know who owns the peanut butter and who owns the chocolate here, but we have to make it all work together. And if we got to go a little bit deeper on technology and understand what opportunities it brings to us, because there are new strategies, new techniques that we should be taking advantage of in businesses. We also have to communicate that to our workforce, which is difficult because their workforces are huge. Sometimes
Mark,
the techniques are sophisticated.
Yeah, let me jump in there for a minute because now I'm starting to feel my brain dot connect here. You mentioned workforce. Melody, you mentioned succession, and it's one of the things I know you care deeply about, both of you as mentors and coaches and amazing individuals that one day will go on to your next chapter and adventure. How are you seeing that, and I'll come back to you on this as well, Mark, the succession and workforce, one of the programs you lead, Melody. Talk a little bit about that passion you have and how technology is enabling or hopefully enabling that union.
Yeah, this is a very passionate topic for me, particularly as I'm in an industry, the government, that is very seasoned. Our average retirement age is over 50, and many of us, you've heard the stories about the silver tsunami, yet we're not attracting that next generation to the government because it's hard for us to compete, particularly in the IT world, with, the Facebook, the Googles, the Apples. But one thing we can compete with is national security, as our mission. You are going to be coming in and adding value, making a difference, and not just, sitting in a cubicle and working on one isolated widget. So we have the value of our mission that we can sell. But we also need to be savvy enough to recognize the next generation of workers, they work differently. They're very comfortable and used to the data, the digital world, the working more virtual, and telework. Some of us old school folks, we were talking a little bit about telework, and I think this virus is testing our system, is that we're going to have to be flexible with work-life balance and, flexible on telework and flexible, to some of these other tools. I used to work in a high national security environment, and how can you attract this young generation and say, but you have to leave your cell phone, locked in a box outside the door? I don't think, the millennials are used to ever parting with their phones. So we really got to look at new ways to attract and retain this next generation if we want to be successful, and we're going to have to adapt and be flexible as well. But we can do it.
Melody, just to kind of close out that, and I think that's awesome in terms of thinking about next gen. A couple questions are streaming in, and again, Mark, this is the lead-in for yours, and just if I can grab you, Melody, on tail end of those comments. We mentioned earlier about the CIO. Every federal agency has one. Obviously, these are awesome individuals, have a job that is, I could arguably say is thankless. Keep the lights on. Not many people come by and say, hey, man, what a great day keeping the network up and running. During these times ahead, or the new normal, how do you envision in EM or in parts of the programs that communications aren't overburdened to the point where the citizens and the government are going to be kind of, the question is about being stranded. Do you see a need for or an incentivizing of the CIO community in your agency to be more involved in some of the mission work, not just as they keep the lights on, but they're going to be critical, right, in terms of this new normal?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just a parting shot there on how you personally are going to try to help enable that.
Yeah, so we're creating these communities of practice around our mission to help inform, educate, and have them better understand our challenges and problems. So it's like, everybody roll up your sleeves, come together, and let's each talk about what our constraints are and also what our opportunities are if we bridge that gap and work together. So we're starting these community of practice. One of the areas that we're definitely looking at is our groundwater monitoring and how our CIO office, and you're probably aware of it, working with Pam Isom, is looking at these communities of change and innovation labs where we can kind of play in a sandbox together, IT and the mission folks, and see what the realm of the possibilities are playing in that innovation lab sandbox. So we're looking at that in different ways now.
Yeah, I think that's great. And those of you listening in, Melody, thank you for that. I look forward to seeing you, obviously, somehow, some way, virtual or in person. But this idea of innovation labs, you mentioned Pam Isom, who's the deputy CIO at the DOE, building an innovation community center and bringing together mission owners with use cases, technology solutions, and ways to rethink and tackle the art of the possible in a sandbox is spot on. And that's great feedback for how we're going to have to address, I think, the future. And that's, really trying to test things out for agencies from a strict communication perspective. Mark, what are your thoughts on what you've seen at the DoD that you think will morph more immediately into that bridging of we need to look at this new normal and communicate in a way such that our mission and technology providers, the CIOs in this case, we have the right infrastructure, the secure infrastructure to protect a lot of the data you discussed earlier?
Well, I'm going to go to a little bit of a vignette because I think I'm going to go to I told you I'm a little bit player here in terms of the acquisition data. But one of the things we established a few years ago, I would say 7-8 years ago, was a governance structure around the data. We were focused on the mission area of data, of acquisition data throughout the Department of Defense. Had various leaders there because we've changed over time. Now it's Ms. Stacy Cummings, who's the principal deputy in acquisition for Mr. Fahey, presiding over that. But as that body, we've had a steering group that would meet twice a year to set the agenda of what would be important for us to take on in this next year, not the next 5 years, the next year. And we would meet every 6 months and see our progress to that. Well, a part of that governance structure, given that data is a ubiquitous asset in the department, who did we have as a part of that? We had our OSD partners. So to name a few, the chief management officer, the CIO. We also had the chief data officer as a part of that. We had the services. We had other functional areas, for instance, the cost assessment group and other users of our data, because our data was so critical, as pointed out by the IG, the GAO, and everyone in the department, of what data are we talking about, how are we talking about it, and how are we enabling ourselves, which is a big organization, we can't do it overnight. And how do we take positive steps to that? And one of the keys here is being transparent and not only sharing the asset of data, but sharing the asset of the vision of where you are in your evolution of making data the centerpiece for acquisition. Ms. Lord has been very clear that data is part of the foundation for that. Ms. Cummings is clear that that is a key component of that. And our role as operators, if you will, working across the seams of the organization, bringing those seams together, create a collective vision for we know where we are and we know where we're going next. That has been extremely powerful. And not only to communicate that to the workforce, but communicate that to ourselves. And where other people can bring their contributions of saying, here's where we're going, and work through some of those issues.
So, Mark, that you had a wonderful, comprehensive answer to, and you spawned a few questions for me. You brought up Ms. Cummings. You talked about sharing data, and I have to come back to something that I believe wholeheartedly when it comes to this world of cloud, right? The volume, velocity, variety, veracity of the data, than protecting that data in the cloud. I think we've all come as a government and industry to accept that the cloud is not a bad place because of its scalability. Protecting data in the cloud, unless you really feel you could do it better in your data center, in your closet, in a room, in your building. I think we know that data protection in the cloud, and a lot of our service providers can offer that. It still is a comfort. But you mentioned Ms. Cummings. I've heard her talk recently as well about policy and procedure, that, standards that, while antiquated, I'm using my word now, we can't wait for that. What are your thoughts on, while we're working on standards and policy and mandates for some of these former ways of thinking? You mentioned time horizon of a year out versus just the 3 and 5 year horizon. What's your thought, or what are your thoughts on that balance between a mandate and a policy, but also not stifling innovation as we really look to share information, use certain tools, and do some of these, as Melody pointed out, sandboxing of new technologies? How do you look at that when it's in the federal circle?
So I think you've got to really go to big scale at that point, because it's not just about our business systems. You have to look at the entirety of the mission area. And if you've heard Ms. Cummings recently and heard the department talk about it, Ms. Lord, there's an awful lot of dialogue, an awful lot of policies been rewritten in terms of the acquisition pathways, enabling acquisition pathways across the department. So how do we buy things? How do we buy big things? How do we institutionalize where we insert technology in major weapon system platforms rapidly under time things? How do we buy software? How do we do business systems? How do we do services? All of those policies, almost every one of them, they have refactored the policy, and over the past year have been rewritten and republicized to enable program managers to have a variety of policy tools to use it as they see fit when they need it. In other words, let's not have this cookbook prescription of programs take forever. Do what you need to do based upon your needs and based upon your requirements, and empower those program managers and the services to deliver goods and capabilities. And I think it is well beyond the systems that we talk about that are generally can be classified as a segment of business systems or technology capabilities that do that. And we need to think at a much larger scale when we get to that, because that's really what acquisition's about. And I think oftentimes in our community, we focus on a bit of the narrow of business and business systems. Well, always it's the smaller part of what we spend. We spend more in services across a bandwidth and major weapon systems than we'll ever spend on business systems. But business systems need to enable all of that. And I think we need to really kind of think about that. And the department's push is to move for being more rapid. So let me bring that back very tactically within a year. So if we're going to manage and enable an acquisition pathway, last year the priority was enabling middle tier of acquisition. In a matter of months, to enable the data for middle tier of acquisition, the policy, a draft policy was written in the summer of last year. We were able to collect data within months, and within a year, we were able to enable that in our systems with the services of going machine to machine and pushing that across that. That was all within a year. That was one of the major pathways. We're moving off legacy systems in terms of managing environments today and moving to a system that we call DAVE, the Data Acquisition Visibility Environment, which is built upon commercial best practices and open source to manage both the security, access, dissemination, as well as the definitional pieces of our data that we could share across the department. And in a short order, a year and a half, be able to move $1.7 trillion worth of data across the services to us and to others, like the chief data officer, who will be able to use that in their decision-making tools. No small adventures, but you have to be able to chunk it into pieces that are meaningful for the mission, where the mission recognizes it. I just want to build as you would say, riff on this a bit, because I think it is the least understood. And we talked about people. I think about people as small batch fine whiskeys. Right now, we're making people almost one at a time. I mean, we can always buy something, but creating a data intellectualism of our workforce is, and not only to understand that data is important, but understand the tenets of how data is managed. And you'll find a lot of technical terms, a lot of functional terms, and a lot of statistical terms, and all that is going to be where we will be for a while, and enabling that. But being able to do that and having an organization like ours worry about that, where I have good leaders like Laura Cooper and good industry partners here to help push that ball forward, that understand what all of that means. Most people don't want to deal with that. And the organization has to recognize that that too is an asset for that.
So, Mark, you're bringing up some things, again, for those of listening, Mark Krishko from the DoD, acquisition, analytics, he's got a great mission. And this is not somebody who is, and forgive me in advance, Mark, but, I consider you a technologist, but it's not like you grew up in a lot of the technology journey or on a journey like I did, where I started off thinking one day I wanted to be CIO and CTO. I found myself at times with the Department of Education and Defense, where I was sort of not even engaged in the mission. I was too busy worrying about the data center and tools and doing the industry bake-offs and so forth. And one day I woke up and I don't have anybody in here in the mission space, as part of the dialogue. And you mentioned Ms. Cummings, you mentioned open source. How are you, as an acquisition individual who is a technologist, finding that dialogue with industry, whether it's I would imagine you get a lot of calls from people, right? When you give speeches, people come up, they want to meet with you, they want to come in and show you their latest. How are you seeing that world change now and probably in the future, where, sure, come on in and see me, and then your role to bring the other influencer advocators, if you will, into the room? Because a one-off meeting times 10 for a rep from a cloud company or an analytics company, nobody really wins. It's sort of creating more and more inertia. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are for this audience, for this discussion on, if somebody were to reach back to you after this webinar and say, hey, that guy gets tech, I want to go have a meeting with him or her. How do you think what's your responsibility to make sure the right people are in the room?
I'm going to step a little bit back on this one, because I think that senior leaders have changed over the past decade. They're pretty smart about this stuff. They may not know all the individuals, and Pete, you know this. A lot of people always want to meet with the biggest person they can in the room. You know that from personal experience. And not always are they the ones that are the effector, but they set strategic direction. So, I mean, Ms. Lord, Ms. Cummings, they have access to a lot of people. I think, and this gets back to that data intellectualism, I work in an OSD organization. While we talk in terms of big money, none of that's mine. We're moving data on that. And most of this, the lion's share, is executed in the services. So when we think about it as tools and techniques, I'm buying a quarter pound. I'm not buying 4,000 pounds of this. But it's just the same bit of dialogue. And organizationally, I've tried to lead and mentor both the services to understand that this data intellectualism, and I am truly blessed to work with some great colleagues in the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They get it and understand of why this is important. of being able to be in a room with a technologist. And, I think back to the days of, buying software for major weapon systems. I was the contracting officer. I needed to understand the technology, or I didn't know really what I was buying. And while I've always been on the mission area, you said to tie in some vignettes. Well, since it's March 15th, 30 years ago, I decided I was going to leave retail, and I wanted to rework on my career. I didn't know where it was going to take me, and I quit my job at Lord & Taylor, being a ragman, so to speak, in operations. And my journey took me, and what I wanted to be when I grew up was, I saw technology was going to influence. I've always fashioned myself a business guy. That technology was going to be a component of what we did. I immediately spent $4,000, went out there and bought a 386SX IBM computer for $4,000. And I bought a box of 3x5 diskettes for $50. And I think my memory was 1 megabyte, and I probably had 10 megs of hard drive for $4,000. And I remember, and it seems profound today, that I knew the technology was always going to be a part of where we were going to be. In fact, when I went back to school, I went back to study hardware and software systems and software and knowledge engineering. But the Navy wouldn't pay for that, and they pushed me into finance and acquisition, and I was so broke that that's where I went. But technology has never been off my radar.
So Mark, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll talk all day. You know that.
No. It's all good. And here's the question I have for you, Mark. And again, for those listening, I would imagine we have a bit of a disparate audience here today of folks in industry and government. Industry, we have sales folks, we have business development folks, we have marketing folks, right. We have engineers. What is the dialogue that you'd like to have with industry? And let's just say you're giving a speech today, and you knock it out of the park like you always do when I hear you speak and read what you say. What would your advice be when the person hands you the business card and says, "I'd love to get some time on your calendar"? How would you want, or what would you want them to do to prep for that meeting? I think that's important at this juncture of the conversation, because we're getting to where everyone's different, but Mark Fishko, who, yes, you are influential, you have a great title, you're a mentor, and you're probably coaching people on how to engage industry. What do you want to hear these people come prepared to that 30 minutes or 45 minutes if they're fortunate to have time with you? What do you want them to be doing to prepare for that?
Usually what we have, particularly since I don't have a lot of money, we're usually on the sharing of ideas, sharing the problems. And what I advise industry to do is understand the problems of what we are grappling with. I also say there's probably not a magic bean. If there was, we would have probably bought it a long time ago. And I think it's difficult for us to what we offer industry, what I personally offer industry, is insight into where we're trying to go and how we're trying to enable data, and where their tools, processes, techniques may result in something for us. Some of my advice is always find a good government client, find a good government customer, somebody who understands, that's willing to take the chance, that understands where that business can be, where their tools, their techniques, where even are they anywhere else, and are they solving somebody else's problems in the department? Are they grappling with different issues that maybe we don't have an answer with, that's bogging them down? Much more on a dialogue of sharing strategic vision and strategic thought, so they can become more insightful to what the problems the department's trying to manage.
So let me summarize it.
Pete, we're huge. We're huge.
Yeah.
We have everything all over the place. And I'm not omniscient. I don't know all the little bits and pieces, but I'm willing to bet you could probably find something somewhere in the department as big as we are.
Yeah, Mark, I do a lot of running around the Beltway now and workshops with regard to those communities being on the other side. And I think a message to those communities, putting on my old hat, it's, the facts tell, stories sell. We talk about, or you hear me mention storytelling and building bridges and trust, and Melody, mentioned this as well as, understand my program, understand my problem. If you don't, come have a conversation. And I think I'm hearing you, and tell me I'm right, wrong, or indifferent, that the message to the question I posed was, you mentioned sharing ideas, understanding our problems, insighting into what DoD is doing, but hey, we could learn a lot from you. And I think the way the structure, and this is again something that I'm going to put out there and you can comment on, I'd appreciate your feedback, is the structure of buying and selling in the government, largest purchaser of IT in the world at $90 billion on average. It's about the meeting and the building that relationship. I get it, but it's also hard because of the fluidity, if you will, with new presidents and elections and viruses and things, that it's very important for government to help navigate and serve as a Sherpa for a lot of these folks that are dying to meet you. But at the same time, I would say that, hey, industry folks, it doesn't take a lot to do some homework before you get that opportunity, because if you can get an advocate in a Mark Krishko to be your Sherpa, I'd say that's a victory, even if he never cut you a check. What are your thoughts on that philosophy?
Well, I'll give you one example where a vendor, I actually called a vendor up because I saw a where, and I was like, could you come in and just talk to me about it? And I got the standard phone call of, hey, here's what we do. And I'm like, did you Google me? I think it's important to understand where both sides are coming from. I mean, whether you're an industry looking for it from government or government doing market research out there, there's tremendous tools of the web these days to find out some of the basic information. And those of us in the government that can share some of our information, we try to make sure it's public, to make sure all of industry knows, not just one. We want everyone to understand what our dilemmas are and issues are, and make sure that we have a picture. Now, where we have to go and secure things, we do that too as well. But there's some things that can clearly be out in the public, and it becomes a balancing act of doing that. And that's why I point to some of the research. I mean, even the RAND research that we had, I made sure that we made determinations that it was publicly available to help not only ourselves, but help industry and help those that are looking to solve problems for us, because industry is a key part of our equation. And stepping up to that is the more we can be transparent. I know of awards that are out there that, they've had industry days. Certainly participate with that. And, on one occasion I got to represent Ms. Cummings and talk about the mission that we have. We're making our mission areas transparent, understand those problems. And not everything is a nail for a hammer. So sometimes you have to study a little bit back. It is, everybody has a tool, but not all tools work the same way for a lot of reasons. And we will always be, I sense, a multi-vendor environment with multi-tools environment. And we're envisioning that. So I think, it's keeping the communications up and transparent.
Yeah. So I got a question to Biff. We actually had a question come in I'm going to pose to you. I'll pose it now so for you to get your neurons firing, and then I'm going to summarize some of what you just pontificated, and I loved it. The question is going to be for you, and it came in from one of our listeners, that in terms of infrastructure, telework capability, we heard Melanie talk about it. I think, again, I call it the new normal. I've been doing this for 4 years, but it's easier said than done when you say, hey, go download the app to do a Zoom or a Join Me or what have you. the question will be, what do you think we need to do from an infrastructure standpoint to enhance, boost, accelerate telework capability? That's the question to ponder. For those in the audience and listeners, I'm going to just highlight some of what I heard Mark say, and that was we have tons of tools. We have a large utility toolbox. Come in and help us either examine what we've invested in and complement, or if you are a current service provider, come in and just have conversations from time to time on what we could be utilizing our application we bought a year ago, a month ago, what have you, or the enhancements to that solution. I think that insightfulness is what federal government folk who don't have time to read every white paper, go to every conference, meet with you incessantly, which would be wonderful. It's impossible. So bring that information to their attention. Okay, so I gave you some time to think there, Big Mark. What do you think, now we're in this new normal, what do you think needs to happen if you could wave your magic wand to make, and as the question asks, boost telework capability?
Hey, Pete and Mark, this is Melody, and if I may, Mark, give you some more time about the magic wand. I have a couple of comments about that real quick because this was very timely on the call that I just had this morning. We are considering giving people flexible work hours so not everybody is on the system at the same time. Right now, we're having a critical challenge with bandwidth and everybody taxing the system at the same time. So we are just talking about having people adjust their hours and that we limit the number of people on the Citrix system at the same time. That's one thing that we're getting ready to do right now. Turn it over to you, Mark.
Thank you. Yep, thanks, Mel.
Well, I'm much more on the consumer side of that, and if I could wave the magic wand, I would have a big pipe from me to the network because I'm on it now. It's amazing, necessity is the mother of invention here. Some things I may have to go in the office for, whether it be SIPR, JWIX, make sure we don't lose our accounts, whether we're moving large files out of Outlook and not transferring them. We are so much an email community, and it is just impossibly hard to manage with email, and I think a lot of that is because of size and speed, and everybody tags everybody else, and we just have unnecessary traffic for that. We need to think about alternative ways of working here.
Yeah, I'm gonna Mark, quick question. And to go back to Melody's comment, the technical component of this. I mean, I'm honest to God. Not honest to God. I'm just sharing. I have 4 children doing online learning in the other room in my home today. I'm sitting in my office, communicating with 2 awesome people in a community of folks in government. This is, to me, what an opportunity. And I'm feeling as though, there isn't anything bad happening, quote unquote. I mean, this is a way to communicate in a way that I think could be introspective, and to me is better suited than having that one-on-one in a meeting for 30 minutes and hoping that you get to the meeting on time and that Melody or Mark don't have to run off to a secretary's, mandated meeting, and then you walk out of there for your industry feeling like, well, that wasn't ideal. But this infrastructure play, Melody, the dialogue and the reality is, if the infrastructure isn't sufficient, if somebody's Wi-Fi in their home isn't what is needed to serve or complement that big pipe, what do you think training or investment might need to be made as a result of this, which isn't a moment in time? But do you feel a need to share a lot of this with the CIO proactively, or are you going to wait for them to say, here's the upgrade we're going to do? Because I think it requires program officials, mission officials saying it's not adequate, and not blame the CIO, but say we need more capacity and we need to be trained on these tools. What are your thoughts? Mark, Melody, any thoughts on that, the training component?
Well, I think change.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
Go ahead, Melody.
Go ahead, Melody.
Okay, yeah. So you hit on a excellent element of the training aspect, but not just the classic butts and seats training element, but also, brown bags and more of a knowledge sharing forum, as well as looking to, just look at more different creative ways of sharing that knowledge of how we can expand in this area. I'm a fan of brown bags and lunch and learn, more informal setting, and I call it micro learning. And rather than have people sit in a classroom for hours at a time where, the morning hours already flush through the mind by the afternoon, you have these short snippets of micro learning opportunities. They've done study that is a better way for folks to retain, and you make it smaller, informal, so you get more of the engagement, and you're not just, listening to someone regurgitate facts to you. That'd be my recommendation.
Good comment. And Melody and Mark, Mark, I'm gonna have you comment on that, but I want you to get your parting shots. We're gonna transition out of our little fireside chat here, but I want you to think about what is it you want to leave with the audience, Mel. And then Mark, why don't you respond to some of Melody's comments, if you don't mind.
Well, I think there's the other side of the equation too. Training is changing, education is changing, and that too. I think we as workforce, I got less of my career in front of me than behind me as well, too. We need to change our mindsets as well. And I think that is one of the things that I've been really blessed with, of keeping myself fresh and looking back and saying, why not? Why can't we do that? The danger is if the workforce only accepts what they did. I think these are very dramatic times. We talk about it in terms of training our leadership, training our workforce. The change is just a constant. And that means systems, that means tools, that means techniques, that means models. We need to nurture that in our workforce. And if we are a part of that workforce, and we all are, we must challenge ourselves too, to be able to do things differently and stop with the pet answer of, well, that doesn't work for me. You don't understand. If we don't understand, we all need to come together and figure out the best way to make it work, because things, and we could see from this dramatic time, things are going to be different. They were different after 9/11. We need to adjust, and we need to keep pushing forward as a society, and that'll help us there.
Fantastic. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Go ahead,
Mark,
Mel. Go ahead.
I would definitely say a huge ditto and totally agree with exactly what you're saying. I think we need to look at this as a great opportunity that we can really leverage on an exponential scale moving forward, just like you suggested, Mark. So I definitely echo your comments.
So we have about 5 minutes, and I'm going to pass it over here to Mel, if you can, Melody, with a as I like to call, 30-second, 45-second parting shot. What you heard today, what you feel, in the stream of consciousness you want to leave with our audience. Mark, the same with you. I'm going to offer mine now just as sort of what I captured, and that is this theme of knowledge sharing. I love the word intellectualism, data intellectualism, that phrase. I believe, and you have cemented and underpinned, underscored, what have you, for me, having been in government for 25 years, the importance of collaboration, sometimes not for a sell or for a paycheck, but more to be a partner. I think industry is incredibly awesome at attempting to meet with and dialogue, but that this world we're moving toward will require more a different medium, if you will, but also that same goal to instill and cultivate trust with the federal government. The silver tsunami phrase, Melody, was someone I had never heard of, believe it or not, but I think is pretty funny and cool. It addresses the role that as mentors and coaches that you both are, and we can be in industry for the next generation is significant. And some questions are coming in here at the end that address this, emerging tech and the new normal and analytics and protecting data. I think, my view is all of that's going to be important now. It was important 10 years ago. It's going to be important 10 years from now. How we go about it will depend on that partnership with industry, government, entrepreneurial, academia domains, and I think we can leverage wonderful institutions like ACT-IAC going forward. So I hope I sucked a little bit of air to get your neurons firing. But Melody, what's your parting shot? And then Mark.
Yeah, and thanks again for this opportunity. And Mark, I really enjoyed.
Hello? Melody? Mark?
I'm
We're
here.
having a little. Okay.
I'm here.
Sorry, we had a little dead air there. Melody was
Hello?
talking.
Hello?
Can
you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Melody. You're up.
Oh, so sorry. So I was saying that, Mark, you and I totally aligned, and I agree with everything that you said. And Pete, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I'll be very quick. And the key is knowledge sharing and transfer from the current generation to the next to accelerate at an exponential rate, moving to that new paradigm. We want to be innovative, we want to be creative, and we really want to maximize collaboration to get all synapses firing in the same direction. So I think this is a great opportunity in partnering industry, government, and individuals. So thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts and insights. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you, Melody. Mark, parting shot?
We're all in it together. I think the thing is collaboration. The most important thing is Melody and I are not going to solve the world's problems. We're putting planks down for the next generation to take advantage of as we see fit, so they could be better. And we're putting planks down for industry too, sharing our vision, sharing what we know, so industry can provide better tools, processes, techniques, so our workforce can take advantage and be creative in solving these problems. And that's what makes us strong as a nation. It's what protects us. It's what enables us. And we're just bit players in a big world, but I think it's important for us to recognize we are players. And we can always be more by working collaboratively across the seams and helping each other up and making this a better place.
Well, Mark and Melody, I'm going to, before I pass the torch here to my colleague Tom Cuneo to take our listeners through a few brief overview slides of the NNT Community of Interest, I'm giving you both a virtual hug, literally. Even if I saw you in person, I wouldn't physically hug you, which would be killing me because, you know, I'm a hugger. But your authenticity, your humility, your credibility is incredible. Thank you for the time. I know it took a lot to take out of your day, but you're two awesome individuals. I'm honored to know you. I'm blessed to know you. And thank you for your insights. And I hope our listening audience just can appreciate a lot of what you had to offer. So thank you again. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Tom Cuneo, and we're going to move through a couple slides.
Okay. Well, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Melody. And thank you, Mark. So mission first and people always, and collaboration. Those are some of the messages that I got today. And again, thank you. The slide that should be showing right now and is on my computer is the Networks and Telecommunications Community of Interest Leadership. I'm the industry chair. I'm Tom Cuneo with Vision Technologies. My government chair is Kevin Gallo at GSA. Industry Vice Chair Dee Delaney, AT&T, and Government Vice Chair Andrew Lowe. The four of us are elected by the Community of Interest. We have an amazing programs group, which it consists of Deidre Murray, Pete Saronis, and J.D. Henley. Matt French does our communications. Bob Woods, Jim Williams, Jim Soltis, Denny Groh are all advisors. And then we have a lot of different work groups, a 5G work group, a network modernization, zero trust networking, and IPv6. The reason I read the names are if you're in the telecommunications space, our group has got a very, very, very robust roster. So next slide, please. So I'm not going to read the mission statement, but you can take a look at it. The Networks and Telecommunications was the very first community of interest at ACT-IAC. We've been around for well over 20-something years. Many of us have been involved that long with Networks and Telecommunications. Next slide, please. So we have a 5G working group, and in fact, we have a 5G white paper that is in for leadership review, and by Friday of this week, my leadership group will review that white paper, send it back to Nancy Delanoche with comments, and it'll go through next steps. Next slide, please. The Network Modernization Group meets, I think, once a month now, where we go over different topics and talk about the EIS contract, amongst other things. Next slide, please. Although IPv6 seems really boring, there's been OMB's got some new mandates for IPv6, so we've kind of dusted off that working group, and we will be doing some response to the OMB directives. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tom. This is Deirdre Murray. I just want to bring you 30 seconds worth of the ACT-IAC Institute for Innovation Success Stories case studies. One of those 6 is focused on enterprise infrastructure solutions. It's actually, the title of the study is EIS Providing the Government's Future Infrastructure Now. It was inspired by Suzette Kent. She asked for it and asked IAC to deliver upon it. It's a case study selection criteria that ties to the PMA, and so therefore one of those 6 listed, of course, is the one we're focused on, the Networks and Telecom. The team is a wonderful group of folks within this NNT community. The lead is Dave Powner, former GAO, now with MITRE, and our executive sponsor is Bill Zielinski. So our timeline is end of March. So I just want to keep you all informed. Thanks, Tom.
Hey, Deirdre, thanks. This is Pete. And as you see, if you're not looking online, or if you do see, we want to thank everybody. I have to give a huge shout out to my colleagues, Deirdre Murray, Nancy Delanoche, Dave Wenegren, Tom Scanlon, Tom Cuneo. What an awesome opportunity to, in light of the situation we're dealing with globally, to pull this community together. We're always looking forward to doing more activity and presenting thought leadership in a manner that not only has to react to the situation at hand, but to enrich the experience. So thank you to my friends and colleagues, and of course, Mark and Melody. And we look forward to doing this again soon. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks so
Fantastic.